What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was forced into the ultimate harem test, with no way out? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Running a hand through his damp hair, he released a sigh of despair. He opened his eyes, revealing brilliant azure pools. He looked around the room he was currently in. A completely white and very spacious bathroom. A lot larger than he really needed. Not a single thing out of place. He looked at the mirror that was fogged up so he could not see his image. How did I even get here? He wondered aloud. He wiped at the foggy mirror to reveal wild, spiky blonde hair that hung limply on his head. 3 whisker marks on each cheek and a blue gaze that had an almost ethereal glow. Uzumaki Naruto stared at himself in the mirror and mused to himself. Such a cruel fate for the hero of the 4th grade shinobi war. He would have never thought he had to go to school again. He didn't need grades, all he needed was the ability to kick ass and take names. Alas, fate is a cruel mistress. Sighing again, he took a once-over of his reflection. He could say he actually liked what he saw. In his youth he had always been the stumpy one, the midget. He was also somewhat malnourished when he was younger. He now stood at 6 feet 1. Which was quite a bit taller than most of the people his age in this city. His body was well defined, built for speed and power. His body was molded for combat and had a nice V-shape that many men had tried and failed to get. While looking at himself, he thought about his current predicament. The blonde was in a city known as Kuo. He had landed here after tackling Madara and telling Kakashi to send them someplace so far that they would never come back. After witnessing Madara's power, he knew that there was only one real way to save everyone from the bastard, and he couldn't let anyone else make that sacrifice. It took a lot of convincing before Kakashi finally conceded. It was Naruto's choice, since only he had a real chance of surviving the dimensional leap that had to be big enough to warp away the newest Jubi Jinchuriki. Naruto was honestly surprised when he found that he was not dead. It was unexpected. He kind of figured it was a badass way to go so he wouldn't have minded dying. After drying himself off, he headed out into the lounge room. The room was absolutely huge. He was in the penthouse suite in a very modern building. Modern is not the word that Naruto would use. The stuff that Naruto saw were freaking space age to him. Everything was designed in weird, beautiful patterns of modern architecture, and there were waterfall walls. He didn't even know something like that could exist. There was also a very large television protruding from the wall that was turned off. He would turn it on if he knew how to work the thing. There was also a pool table, a game which he had yet to learn how to play, near the corner of the room. The floor had white tiles that seemed to reflect everything perfectly with a beautiful shine. The kitchen seemed to have every cooking utensil you would ever need to make just about anything you would desire. He was actually glad for that. He seemed to establish a love for cooking on his adventures with Jiraiya. Seems that there were other things to eat other than ramen in the world. Who knew? Making a long trek to the bedroom, due to the sheer size of the lounge room, he finally made it and came to a halt when he saw what was on the bed. Naruto took to glowering at the school uniform that sat on the bed, as if taunting him. He clicked his tongue unapprovingly. He let out yet another sigh of dismay as he put the clothing on. Once on, he looked at his reflection yet again, but this time in a full-length mirror. Naruto was kind of impressed. Sure, it wasn't as beautiful as his orange jumpsuit, but it was a start. He inspected the clothing that was on him. He had a choice between this and the regular uniform. His was slightly modified in design. Vibrant red highlights and a darker dress shirt than the plain white. The blazer and slacks he wore were a lot darker as well, jet black instead of faded black. The tie remained the same. Turning to look at the bed, he weighed the pros and cons of just going back to sleep. After a few seconds in thought, he decided against it. The person who had done this all for him wanted him to go to this school, and he did owe him or her for doing all of this for him. He frowned slightly at that. He honestly had no idea who the person was that was helping him. He also had no clue how it would benefit this mystery person. He had not been in this dimension for 2 days before some rough-looking guys came up and told him to come with them. Naruto couldn't do much else other than follow their orders. He was simply too weak after the goddamn painful trip he went through to get here. With a bit of trepidation, he followed them and came to the hotel that he was sitting in right now. They left him some of the essentials he needed, such as food and hygiene products. Then they just left. This was the third day he was here, and it was a lot more comfortable sleeping in this downright amazing bed, as opposed to the grassy floor in some park, groaning in pain for a few hours before passing out and then having to wake up to some random buff dudes demanding things from you. Yeah, not the greatest day of his life. Last night was much more accommodating. In truth, Naruto had been in very few apartments that weren't a complete dump. After leaving the orphanage, he ended up having to stay in the seediest part of Konohagakure in a very, very shitty apartment, where he spent most of his life. In fact, after pain had destroyed the entire village, he had actually been offered one of the biggest tents that they had to offer, on the count of the fact that he was the hero of Konoha. He politely declined, reasoning that a few families could fit in there and it would still be spacious, instead of just one family that was cramped in the standard tent. He didn't need the room, he was used to being in worse living conditions than a regular-sized tent, so he didn't want to take anything more than he needed. Coming here and looking at his current living conditions actually made him slightly uncomfortable. This was a bit much, wasn't it? He looked to the window, which was the entire wall of the living room. He was living in the more urban area of this city. The academy he had to go to was pretty close, all things considered, 15 minutes walk maybe. He felt weird looking out on the city. This building was an ungodly size. Well, ungodly for him anyway. Walking down to the door, he took the key card off the shelf and put on some black sneakers. Opening the portal, he left out to his new life. Can't be as crappy as it was in the academy, right? He thought to himself weakly. Okay, it is going to be a lot worse, Naruto said aloud, his eye twitching as he looked at his timetable. Why the hell did he need to learn this stuff? Naruto was never really the academic type, so seeing the subjects that he had to do were his weakest ones was beyond annoying. He really felt like punching something right now. After looking at the timetable in his hands with disdain for a few more seconds, he decided it was best for his sanity if he just pocketed it. Sighing dramatically, he rounded the corner and saw that he was at his destination. Walking through the school gates, he looked up at the main school building, to find it was enormous. Seriously, what was with this world with its need to make everything huge? Naruto was quite taken with its design. It made the academy back at home look like a small children's playground in comparison. Looking around, he saw that most of the students here were female. Very few guys in sight at all. Upon his arrival, the students seemed to have stopped everything they were doing to look at the blonde. Maybe it was the color of his hair? It seemed like it was very rare to have a blonde hair color in this town. Or perhaps it was this world. A few whispers could be heard, as well as the giggling from girls who were in groups. Naruto didn't really know what was funny. There might have been something wrong with his appearance. He looked himself up and down, then looked at the still giggling girls, then back at himself. He shook his head. I just do not understand girls, he thought to himself, as he walked through the main entrance. Walking through the main hallway, which was also very large, he decided to head to his homeroom. Much easier said than done. Walking down the hallways, that was decidedly a labyrinth made for the specific reason to be an inconvenience to everyone who attended, got tedious after he got lost for the third fucking time. After a while, he decided that the gods hated him. They might even take pleasure in seeing him have a bad time. Surely this couldn't have been karma. He was a hero for Kami's sake. Could he not just have a somewhat normal day? As he finished his inner ramblings, he came to a halt at the door he was trying to find for the last 10 minutes. Well, small miracles. Opening the door, he stepped in to find all the idle chatter slowly coming to a stop as he walked in. The teacher saw him and threw him a wonderful smile. Ah, you must be Uzumaki-kun, just in time, she said delicately. Yeah, that's me, he said somewhat uneasily. Wonderful, why don't you introduce yourself? She asked pleasantly, making room for him to come stand at the front, next to her. Sure, he shrugged. Walking to the center stage, he saw everyone was looking at him. Naruto gained some of his confidence back and quickly slipped into his optimistic attitude. Hey, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, hope we get along well, he said with a slight wave and a grin. Time to get his friendly personality back on. Sort of sucked being so gloomy for the few days he was here. Naruto walked to his designated seat and promptly fell asleep as soon as he could. Stealthily, of course. Naruto sat in a meditative pose under a tree. Now that he wasn't being swarmed with questions from his classmates, he could focus on doing things that needed to be done. The class all seemed to believe him to be a foreigner due to his sun-kissed blonde hair and blue eyes. Every one of them asking questions at the same time. He could barely take it, so he made a quick retreat as discreetly as he could, which was very difficult considering that everyone's attention was on him. He managed somehow, and he was finally doing what he was trying to get up to since he got here. Sadly, he had been both too busy and too exhausted. His breathing slowed down and he let his mind wander into a dark abyss. Once he cleared his mind, he reached to pull some of his chakra out. He frowned as he felt only a trickle as opposed to the vast ocean it was before. As he tried to pull on the small amount of chakra, he suddenly felt a very sharp pain. Wincing, he stopped pulling on the chakra. Okay, so he should probably wait a little bit before he tries that again. Trying to think of a solution, he cleared his mind again. Think. Come on, what would Kurama do? He stopped thinking at that. Kyuubi, he mentally screamed. He tried to calm down his thoughts once more. After 5 seconds of slow breathing, his mind cleared. Slowly digging into the confines of his mind, he mentally spoke to the beast. Kurama, I need your help. Stop sleeping and talk to me. Silence. Slowly, Naruto tried again. Kurama, if this is a joke, I swear. He let the threat hang in the air, but was again met with silence. He started panicking. Where the hell was that damn fox? Smoothing out his increasingly worried thoughts, he delved back into his mind. He calmed himself until he heard something he thought he wouldn't hear again. Something that made his eye twitch. Perverted giggling. Naruto again calmed himself. Now was not the time to get worked up. Again he heard the giggling. Then more giggling. Slowly it became more than he could handle, and because of his current emotional distress and irritation, he couldn't help himself. Running silently behind the trio responsible, he let himself take in their appearance. One was somewhat regular-looking hair with glasses, which seemed to be fogged up. The other was bald, and was currently drooling onto the ground. The last one was difficult to describe without saying the word regular. He was making a fondling the air with his hands and repeating, "Opie, opie, opie," like a mantra. Each had their own respective peepholes. Naruto was taken aback. They reminded him of his godfather, bless his perverted soul. Naruto might not have been too bothered by them doing this, but right now, they were so very obnoxious. Thinking on what to do, a proverbial light bulb went off in his head. The menacing gleam in his eyes would have chilled someone to the bone had anyone been unfortunate enough to see it. Naruto walked over to the bald pervert merrily. He sat to the left of him and gave him a nice slap on the back and addressed them all. "Hiya guys, having a pleasant time?" he asked jovially. All three turned their heads over to the new speaker and looked at him weirdly. "Who are you?" asked the one with glasses, looking annoyed at having to stop his peeping. "Oh, I'm just a new student." Naruto responded good-naturedly. "I couldn't help but noticing you all humbly admiring the beauty of the woman body," he said loudly. The trio didn't even notice the volume of his voice due to them being absolutely ecstatic. "Yes, another of our kind," exclaimed the ordinary-looking one, who currently had stars in his eyes. "Finally, another male who understands the glory of the woman bodies," cried the bald one, who had anime tears streaming down his face. "You will be the perfect ally. With your good looks, you will be able to help us get beautiful girls that we will ravish endlessly," the one with glasses said with zeal as he adjusted his glasses. If one were able to see through the eyewear, they would have seen the calculative gleam that his eyes held. Already he was going through plans on how to accomplish such a feat. Naruto's sweat dropped. He did not know he was going to get this kind of reaction. He watched as they all started to hug and cry in excitement at what the glasses-wearing pervert said. They all no doubt thought the plan was foolproof. His ears pricked when he heard footsteps approaching them. It would have been too quiet to hear them because of the decibels the perverts were reaching. Naruto was able to hear it because he had very sensitive hearing, and his ability to focus on something with his advanced hearing. Right now he was drowning out their cries and focusing on the footsteps because if he heard the full brunt of their yells he would no doubt be wincing. Once he determined the women were coming dangerously close, he stopped the pervert's shouts with his next statement. "You guys might want to put those plans on hold," Naruto said. He then made a motion to behind trio. The three stopped and turned just in time to see a mob of teenage girls, who all had an aura of pure rage that consumed the surrounding area around them. Some were holding kendo sticks, whilst others were holding tennis rackets and baseball bats. The three paled to an unhealthy shade of white, and turned back to their blonde companion. Only to find nothing. Turning their heads back slowly, they made whimpers as the women walked slowly towards them. "You guys just never learn, do you?" the girl at the front said with a voice that could freeze hell over. She was holding a kendo stick and was testing its weight with some slow practice swings. Making a slow gait towards them, she was followed by her other companions. It was not a good day to be Matsuda, Motohama or Issei right now. A certain blonde was sitting in a tree, trying not to fall off because he was laughing too hard. Hearing the perverts as they wailed in pain was a certain schadenfreude that even Naruto was not immune to. Wiping a stray tear away, he decided he should leave before he actually feels bad for those guys. Leaping nimbly off of the tree, he was about to make a dash for class before he was late. He stopped, however, when he saw something that caught his eyes. Naruto looked up to the window that was on the second story of the main school building. Looking down at him was perhaps one of the most beautiful women that Naruto had seen in his young life. A woman that looked to be around his age. The first feature he was noticed was the long, flowing crimson hair that looked as smooth as silk. It reminded him of his mother's hair, but the woman standing behind the window had hair with a much more vibrant shade of red, that seemed to reflect light. The second feature he noticed was definitely the woman's considerably large bust. Despite their size, there was not a single hint of sag. In fact, they seemed to be giving gravity the finger with their perkiness. He felt bad that that was a feature he noticed so fast, but he was a healthy teenage boy. Spending time with a guy who was perhaps one of the most perverted men in the world had turned into a pervert, it seemed. He mentally shoved those thoughts away as he noticed she was looking at him. Her gaze seemed to be transfixed on him, which is why he noticed her beautiful green and turquoise blue eyes. They seemed to go a dark shade of blue towards the top, and the orbs seemed to refract light. She was absolutely stunning. Naruto saw that she was studying him, and he felt like he should do something. So, almost without thinking, he brought a wide smile to his face and waved towards her. She looked surprised, but then let a small smile play itself onto her features and waved a delicate hand back at him. Hearing the bell, Naruto sagged and decided to get his last couple of useless classes out of the way before taking a rest in his room spa. He hadn't tried it out, but he doubted that it was going to be anything less than premium quality. How much did his room cost for his stay? He almost shivered at the thought. It would have to have more zeros in its paycheck for a week than a year's worth of ramen would cost. He almost grimaced at that thought, but settled for shaking his head as he trudged his way to class. "Akeno," called a smooth voice. "Hi, Rias," said the addressed woman, now identified as Akeno. "Who is that boy?" Rias pointed to the blonde that looked rather dejected as he headed towards the entrance of the main school building. Era, that's the new foreign student. He is in class 2B and this is his first day attending," said Akeno in a pleasant tone. Her violet eyes took on a mischievous look. "Are you stating claims on him already?" she said in a sultry tone of voice. Rias ignored her best friend's teasing nature and the obvious double meaning, but still answered, "Perhaps I should," she said in obvious thought. In truth, she was not really thinking about adding him to her peerage. She could barely sense any magic coming from him, if any at all. However, he did pique her interest, and not only because she had never seen him before. She had a feeling about him, she was not even sure what she was having a feeling of. Yet, she couldn't help but think that something was different about him. Oh my, what a pity. He would have looked absolutely delicious, screaming in delight at my hands," Akeno said in a husky voice, as she put a hand to her blushing face. Rias ignored her again. She turned to the shower room while taking off her clothes, not at all bothered by Akeno's presence. She decided to put the thoughts about the blonde in the back of her mind. A content sigh escaped Naruto's lips as he sat on a bench chair in the park where he first entered this strange world. He had been here for around a week now. School had been strangely tiring throughout the week, even though he was asleep for most of the classes. He chalked it up to the exhaustion that his body seemed to be in after coming here. It was as if all of his previous strength had been drained. Right now, he was in his weakened state and he wasn't sure when, or if, his body would fully recover. He had stayed awake during history class to hear about the world he was now in, and it seemed to be vastly different compared to his world. Apparently he is in a country called Japan. This is a very small country compared to some of the others that are outside of its borders. In this world, they had a huge amount of technology and weaponry that Naruto never thought anyone would be capable of making. It was actually pretty scary thinking just how powerful of weapons this place had. Through technology alone, these people were capable of making bombs that could rival the Jubi's tailed beast bomb. That was impressive. Not only were the bombs they made much more powerful, the weapons were on a whole other level as well. Having automated weapons that could shoot lead faster than the eye could see is just scary. Other than that, it seemed that there was a very rich history to this world, way more than Naruto was willing to learn. He was kind of interested in this world's history though. After last period, a group of girls had come up to him and asked if he wanted to hang out with them for a while. He didn't have to think for very long on it. He had to get his mind off of his furry friend that seemed to have disappeared. He tried contacting Kurama again during class but was only met with the deafening silence of his mind. He was beginning to have doubts that his companion made the journey here. When the blonde agreed, he was quickly taken off into the town where they seemed to interrogate him. The blonde was easily able to lie his way out of the situation. Having a godfather that was a spymaster had come in handy. Naruto had to do a few spy missions with Jiraiya, having a brief job working in espionage for the white-haired pervert. So it was natural that he got the complete rundown of how to lie and manipulate others to his will. Naruto never felt good about lying or manipulating, but he did it when he had to. He did not even consider telling them the truth. There was absolutely no way that they would believe him. His story wasn't even plausible to him, and he lived through it. Naruto decided he should try to probe some information from these girls, asking them all about Japanese culture amongst other things, claiming that he was clueless about all of Japan's customs. They were happy to tell him everything he wanted to know. Truthfully, he didn't know why these girls had asked him to hang out with them. Sure, he was the new student and all, but these girls seemed a lot more interested in him than they should be. Naruto was never overly popular with the ladies in his youth. It was largely due to how loud, crass and overall obnoxious he was. In his 3-year training trip, he smoothed out his act a little bit with the ladies. He wouldn't claim to be Casanova, but he was pretty awesome with flirting. He never flirted with Sakura-chan, because she would punch him into next Sunday, like she did every other time. After a few hours, the girls seemed to be happy with how much shopping they all did while dragging him around. Naruto himself needed some clothes, having nothing but his destroyed orange jumpsuit and his school uniform. When he went to every clothing store in the area to find out that he had nothing like his jumpsuit in this city, he was rather sad. So sad that he made a whimpering noise unconsciously. So he settled for buying clothing that applied to this word's fashion. He was lucky that the person who rented the penthouse left quite a large sum of money for him. He had no other choice, he had to delve into this world's fashion, and he did so with great trepidation. Luckily, he had some girls here to give him an opinion. When they found out that he needed clothing, they seemed to sprint into one of the clothing stores with him in tow. Being able to choose clothes for a boy was very exciting to girls for some reason. After they were done, Naruto dropped the new clothing into his apartment. He decided it would probably be good to go back to the park to find out if there was anything he could use to try to contact his world, or even try to go back himself. He greatly doubted he could get back at all by himself, but it was nice to have hope. He investigated the park to find there was a chakra source around a certain area. Naruto couldn't do much with it at the moment, but figured if his chakra comes back he could see how Sage Mode would help his predicament. After a while, he felt decidedly worn out and chose to sit on the park bench. He needed to relax, until he felt something dark. Issei was having a great day. No, great didn't even describe it. He was having an amazing day. After his beating at the hands of some vengeful girls a few days ago, his luck to turn around when this beautiful girl called Yuma confessed to him on a bridge. He didn't know how to react, this had never happened before. He ended up going on a date a few days after the confession, today. He could safely say that he had fallen in love with her. Now he found himself in this park right next to a fountain. The water's surface glistened with the bit of lighting through the park. Issei-kun. Yuma's delicate voice shot him out of his inner musings. Hi, Yuma-chan? He said nervously. Could you do something for me? Yuma asked, walking closer to Issei with her hair covering her eyes and a small blush on her cheeks. She stopped about a front in front of him. What do you need? Was this where you lost his virginity? Oh, by the gods, he hoped so. Could you please die for me? She requested. All of Issei's thoughts that had slowly been turning more perverted by the second halted. He responded, confused. Scratching his cheek he continued, could you repeat that again, Yuma-chan? I think I heard you wrong, Issei said. Slowly, a dark smile spread across her face. I said, could you please die for me? She asked again. Only this time it was with a chilling voice as her face twisted into something that looked alien compared to the innocence that was etched into her face before. Black angel wings spread from her back as her clothes morphed into some bondage clothing that covers very little of her body. Issei would have been drooling out the mouth if it wasn't for the fact that she was holding a very intimidating spear. Her last statement didn't help any as well. Sorry about this, Issei-kun, it was a fun date. I will keep what you got for me as a personal treasure. I guess you are just unlucky. Yuma said with a condescending look. After finishing her sentence she sent the spear sailing towards Issei. Issei froze as he saw his doom approaching. Unable to move because of panic, with a spear that was heading straight for his chest. He guessed it could have been a worse last day. Having a date with this beautiful girl. Expecting the object to kill him in about a second, he resigned himself to his fate, only to be tackled to the ground by another person. Looking up to his savior, he saw someone who he did not expect. That foreign student from school. Yet at the same time, it wasn't him. Before his eyes shined with a friendly glint and he had an almost infectious smile. The look on his face now was completely different to the guy he saw before. Right now he was staring at the girl Issei believed to be someone innocent, with cold, sharp eyes. This face was calculated. His entire persona had made a full 180. Ah, young love, Naruto said nonchalantly, his voice betrayed by the sharp look in his eyes, it truly makes my heart flutter. He ended. Yuma looked at the annoyance that just saved her target with disdain. It would have been so easy to kill the bug, but now she had to kill 2 bugs. You best leave, Blondie. I don't want to waste any more time than I have to, and right now you are standing between me and my kill. If you just walk away, then I will spare your pathetic life. She said with a scowl. Ma, so rude. Perhaps I should fix that attitude of yours. Naruto said easily. Okay. He didn't know if he could actually fight her. He was severely weakened right now. He only really had enough chakra for his body to function, that was about it. He didn't know who, or what, this girl was, and didn't know how strong she was. Judging by the wings that were coming out of her back, she wasn't normal. He didn't know much about this world, but judging from this Issei kid's reaction, this type of thing isn't exactly a regular occurrence. He hadn't heard anything about people with wings and he hadn't seen anyone before her with them, so he would go on a limb and say that this very rarely would ever happen to people. He would think on it later, right now he had to protect this guy. You believe you could kill me? She taunted. After snorting she continued, I don't think you understand how low you are compared to me. I don't really care about that. I'm not the type of person who could just leave someone to die for my own safety. Naruto responded, looking slightly miffed at her holier-than-thou attitude. Petulant child, she called and summoned a spear of light. Before she could throw it at either of them, Naruto sprinted at high speeds towards her. Not expecting that kind of speed from a human, she couldn't react in time when a fist made contact with her face, knocking her to the ground. Naruto capitalized on the dazed state she would no doubt be in and ran towards her. Only to be surprised when he saw that she was standing and looked absolutely livid. Materializing another spear because the other one was flung away after the blonde's strike, she sent it flying at the blonde. Naruto was only just able to evade it by jumping over the weapon. He continued towards her in an attempt to have engaged in close combat. He was surprised again by the speed her strikes were sent. From what he had seen from this world, humans were unable to use their chakra. So they couldn't produce jutsu or enhance their speed, power or strength with chakra. He figured this out after gym class. He was able to dominate every other student in the sports that they played and he wasn't even using chakra. This led him to the conclusion that humans here were much weaker than in the elemental nations. Everyone here were basically civilians. In hindsight, he should have considered her abnormality would translate into her speed and power. Even though she was much faster than him at the moment, he was still able to keep up with her somewhat because of his technique and combat experience. It really paid off to be a trained ninja. The fallen angel was getting increasingly more annoyed with each strike. She was being bested by a human. That made her seethe in anger. She was obviously faster, but he was just so hard hit. Each one of his punches were a lot harder than she expected, and even though they didn't particularly hurt that much, there was enough of them that the pain was adding up. Naruto was winning at the moment, but he knew that he wouldn't last much longer. He could already feel his body tiring because of the speed that he was being forced to move. Damn this weakened state. It balanced out though, because even though his movements were becoming sluggish, her movements were becoming more straightforward and predictable due to her anger. Although she didn't look like she was going to run out of juice anytime soon. Naruto had to finish this quickly. She tried to punch for his face only for him to dodge yet again. This time he grabbed her arm in a lock and struck at her elbow, attempting to break it. The blow landed, but it did not buckle like he thought it would. Instead, she howled in anger and kicked him in the ribs. Naruto rocketed towards the tree that was behind him. He tried to stop himself by sticking to the ground, only to remember he had no chakra that he could use. So he ended up hitting the tree with a great amount of force. Writhing in pain under the tree, he realized that some of his ribs were broken. It was also getting increasingly difficult to breathe. Did one of his ribs puncture his lung? After he coughed up some blood, he realized that yes, one of his ribs had punctured his lung. He would have cursed, but he found the task too difficult to accomplish. He tried pushing himself off the ground to get up, only to find something else that had pierced into him. Out of his chest protruded a spear. He looked at it in a daze. It didn't hurt. Was he losing feeling in his body? Goddamn, if this wasn't the shittiest time of his life. Only a week in this place and he gets a spear through his fucking chest. His vision was slowly getting darker. As he looked over to the one responsible for his current state, he noticed that she looked very haughty over his inevitable demise. He didn't really care though, it was becoming a task to care about anything at this point. He felt so sleepy. Was this how he would die? Dying in a world he knew next to nothing about, with his friends no doubt mourning over his death? With that thought, he slowly managed to gain strength. His fingers twitched sporadically. No, he wouldn't. He was Naruto Uzumaki, the one who fought against someone who people claimed to be a god and won. The one who had saved everyone from a deluded man with a twisted dream. The one who faced down the Jubi without fear. He would not die such a death. He pushed himself off the ground, his muscles groaning in protest. He paid it no mind though. He had to save this perverted kid from his doom. He had to live today to see his friends again. He had to live because he had an obligation to. After standing straight, he pulled the spear out of his chest. He felt the agony that the action brought him, and was forced down on one knee because of the pain. He panted, looking up into the wide, disbelieving eyes of the fallen angel as they stared into his own determined orbs. The fallen angel stared at his chest just in time to see it slowly close up. This boy, he could not be human. She looked back into his eyes and felt her breathing quicken. Staring back at her, were the eyes of such hatred she had to take a step back. No longer were they the brilliant, blue stratospheres that they were. Looking at her now were crimson-red eyes. The pupils were slitted and had an animalistic look about them. The eyes glowed menacingly in the darkness. After the wounds had knitted themselves back together, his ribs snapping back into place with a noise that made her wince. The man pounced at her. The speed was inhuman. She glided into the air to gain some distance so she could conjure up a spear of light, but she found that he was in her space in a split second. He smashed his fist into her stomach, winding her, and sending her plummeting down to the earth. This time when he punched her, it hurt more. Much more. So much in fact that she didn't know if she wanted to stand. The blonde animal did not deign her with the time to recover. He planted his fist in her face with crushing force and threw her at the fountain. The stone of the fountain broke as she impacted it. Adrenaline kicked into her system as she tried flying away. She spread her wings and jumped. She then felt a sharp pain coming from her back as she tried to fly. She turned to find that the red-eyed boy was holding her jet black wings. The fact that the boy was able to hold her back from flying was frightening. She went into panic, screaming for her life and flapping as hard as she could. Her screams brought Naruto out of his trance. He looked to her face, seeing tears prickling at her eyes as she tried desperately to get out of his hold. The fact that he would have killed her in such a harsh way made him feel so guilty. Even if she was trying to kill an innocent, it was just too cruel. He decided he should scare her away instead of outright murdering her. He pulled her down and grabbed her throat. He let out an animalistic growl to stop her screams. "If you try to murder this guy, or anyone from this city again, I will kill you. For now I shall let you go. Next time I will not be so lenient. Do I make myself clear?" he asked in a cold voice. Truthfully, he was holding himself back from snapping her neck right now. What was wrong with him? Last time he was using Kyuubi's chakra he did not have these urges. Seeing her nod rapidly with fear in her dark violet eyes, he let her go. After she was out of his iron grip she flew as fast as she could away. Not looking back at her would be killer. Seeing her leave, he sighed. Shortly after she left his sight, he collapsed in the fountain. His muscles were not responding to his demands. He could barely move, and again he found his consciousness slipping away. This time he felt no power boost, he only felt weak. He looked up through the lens of water, watching as the outside world was distorting into different shapes and colors. He felt so at peace. All of his worries were melting away because of this water. The space felt like an ocean rather than a small fountain. He saw a figure staring down the fountain and looking at him. It was a girl. She looked like she was followed by a crimson cloud that went from her head down her back. He then realized that it was actually the person's hair. A hand suddenly pushed through the water to grab him. That was all he saw before his world turned black. Not at all, Kyuubi said indignantly, looking like he was legitimately insulted by Naruto's accusation. Being perverted and having needs are two completely different things. Kyuubi lectured. Sure, pervert. Naruto rolled his eyes. Why, you ungrateful little. Kyuubi started, and then straightened. It seems that your class is over. The girl promised some answers and I wish to find out if my theories were correct. We will talk after she is done talking to you. Be on your feet. The Nine Tails said. Naruto nodded. Closing his eyes he left his mindscape, his form fading into the darkness that was cloying to the proverbial walls. Naruto shifted into the physical world just in time to find the school Bishonen looking at him with a friendly smile. Yuto Kiba. This guy seemed to radiate princely charm. Almost every girl in the school would probably be willing to jump him if they had duct tape in hand and were in a dark corner where he couldn't escape. The guy kind of reminded Naruto of Sasuke, what with the popularity and all. Only difference being that Kiba was polite, rather than the whole angst teen thing that Sasuke had going on. Hello Uzumaki-kun, do you mind coming with me to Bucko? Kiba asked in a kind tone of voice. Naruto figured that Bucko was Rias. She must have sent for him through Yuto. Perhaps they are in a club of some sort. He shook his thoughts out. Sure, returning Kiba's polite tone of voice with a nonchalant shrug. He stood up and walked through the classroom to the exit. So this Bucko of yours, am I correct when I say that she is Rias-chan? Asked Naruto, his head leaned up to look at the clouds above them. Yes, she is the president of the Occult Research Club, said Yuto. I have heard of that club before. I myself find the ideas of devils and other beings of the like fascinating. Naruto said. He really was quite intrigued by the idea of there being an underworld and other such things. Granted, this fascination was partially due to having a demon in his belly. The recent run-in with the fallen angel only solidified his interest in the subject. Walking along in silence, the duo reached an old-looking building after only a minute. The two blondes stepped through the door, into the building. As Naruto observed the inside of the building, he noticed that it was much cleaner than it was on the outside. Where the outside had slightly tattered walls, the inside was impeccable. Obviously the age wouldn't bother the inhabitants of the building, the inside looked brand new. The two blondes came across another door. Kiba knocked lightly on the door a couple of times. Upon hearing, "Enter," on the other side of the portal, they promptly did as instructed. Naruto was not surprised to see Rias sitting at the table looking towards them. Rias smiled. He was surprised by the other female however. The woman next to Rias was stunning. She had raven black hair that was done in a ponytail with an orange. Her hair was long enough to go down to her feet. Her bust size may have even been bigger than Rias. Her milky skin looked just as smooth as the redheads and her smile seemed a lot more seductive than the graceful smile of the Gremories. Her violet eyes gleamed with mischievousness which was reminiscent of the snake chick at the Chunin exams. "Hello there. Please take a seat Naruto-kun," Rias said. Naruto could have mistook her tone for Sarutobi's, if she was an old man with liver spots and wrinkles, with a grandfatherly voice. She was the exact opposite though. Yeah, sure. Naruto turned to the chair where the other inhabitant was sitting. He froze. Oh no, it was happening again. He realized what the cause was. The petite girl with white hair, who was looking at him with big, beautiful amber eyes. She had rather pale skin, a cute-looking face, and a hairclip in the shape of a black cat. Her silver hair framed her face, with two bangs going past her chin. She was obviously an underclassman because of her stature. Her face was set in a blank stare. He was having the same sort of problem he had with the redhead this morning. The difference being that the girl in front of him was clothed. Naruto was in control when he looked at Rias when she was clothed at least. The girl that was eating cake in front of him right now seemed to radiate this energy that was so damn alluring. Was this the animal instincts kicking in? He realized with a start that he had been in the same place a few seconds longer than he should have been and moved next to the cat-like girl and sat down. He controlled his lust for now. Damn that perverted Kyuubi. I apologize for summoning you here in such haste, said Rias. Her face soon adopted a very serious expression as she said her next statement. But I could not risk the chance for anyone who might listen in on the conversation that will ensue. You pulled quite a stunt, beating a fallen angel by yourself. She said slowly. What was that demonic magic that you pulled during the fight? She asked seriously. Naruto stiffened. She was able to distinguish his chakra as being demonic, meaning that she likely had experience in similar things. I went to the location where I could feel a demonic signature. I did not expect you to be there. She commented. What was Naruto to do? He seemed to be cornered. He could lie his way through this, but he doubted that he could slip his way out of this one. If she knew that the chakra he leaked was demonic, then there was almost no way he could get through this by lying. He took a deep breath and looked towards her. What makes you think that what you felt was that of a demonic nature? Do you have experience in these things? Naruto started, wanting to take this down another road. He didn't exactly want to be some sort of guinea pig in a lab if these guys learnt that he was from another dimension. He could easily prove that he was not from this world via Bunshin or any other jutsu, but that would lead him to getting experimented on for perhaps the rest of his life. He did not want that. That is to be expected. You see, we are all devils, she said lightly. Naruto blinked once, twice, thrice, before deciding to grace the room with a sophisticated response. Huh? Naruto asked, his head leaning in as if that would answer his question. He was startled back when wings shot out from Ria's back, prompting the others in the room to display their bat-like wings boisterously. Judging by your reaction, you did not expect this, the president of the club said. Well, I don't really expect people to just pop wings out of their backs and claim that they are devils every day, Naruto said dryly, after regaining his composure. I understand. I will elaborate for your sake then. We are not humans, we are beings that come from the underworld, or hell as people call it. We have powers that regular Homo sapiens do not, and possess traits that are different that humans also lack, she said, gesturing to the wings on her back. Okay, not the weirdest thing that I've ever heard, I guess, Naruto replied, startling all the occupants in the room, sans Rias. Somehow I knew that you would have that kind of reaction, said Rias. After all, you are not of this world either, she stated. Naruto straightened his back slightly. And why would you think that? He asked. After your fight with the fallen angel known as Rainier, I came because of the energy that was emitted. It was a very malevolent energy that you put out. Going to the signature, I found you standing in a fountain, knee-deep in water with Rainier flying away erratically, and then you collapsed into the water. The power that was in the area was definitely not of a fallen angel's, nor one of a devil's. It was definitely not of this world, the busty redhead stated simply. Naruto was slightly on edge. The last encounter with someone with wings didn't exactly end well for him. He didn't want to repeat the same mistake. His muscles were slightly tensed to make sure that he could make a quick retreat if need be. He highly doubted that he could fight everyone in the room, even if he did have significantly more chakra than he had while versing Rainier. He let out a slightly relieved breath when everyone's wings retracted into their backs, blocked from view. If Rias was willing to reveal herself and her companion's identity as devils, then he supposed he could cross out the possibility of them turning him into a lab of some sort, but he was still wary. He would see where this would go, however. He needed the information. If I said that I was from another world, What would you do with the information? Naruto asked tightly. I would have to see what your abilities are and take you to someone so they could examine you. She said. Naruto let a concealed kunai slip through his blazer sleeve into his hand at her statement. The kunai itself was made by him. He had 3 in his arsenal. 3 was all he could forge in the time he was in this world. He did not want to kill anyone here. Gods above, he did not want to kill anyone. He had seen what killing does, and it is never a good outcome. He would avoid killing unless absolutely necessary. He was just using the weapon as a cautionary step. You would take me to be tested on? His eyes darkened at his own words. Rias noticed the coldness in his voice, so she quickly explained to him what she meant. You will not be tested on in an experimental way. You were able to beat a fallen angel without using any magic. You did use some sword energy though, and that is what they would like to test. She said in a calming voice, her gaze slightly softened. And who might they be? Naruto asked. My brother will be the one who would like to meet you. If he finds anything interesting in you, then he may introduce you to the life of a devil. Prove you are not a threat and my family shall welcome you. She said. Why would I want to become a devil? No offense, but I am not sure I would be interested in becoming a being that is portrayed as sinister in almost book, movie, TV show and pretty much every source of media. Naruto said, ticking off everything with his fingers. He used the hand that didn't have a weapon being held in it. There are many benefits. Powers, increased strength, agility, the ability to fly, longevity. Need I go on? She asked rhetorically. Though, I am unsure on what abilities you possess as of right now. Sorry, but I must decline. I have only known you for a day, so forgive me for not putting a whole lot of trust in you. Naruto spoke, standing up and attempting to leave. I will not allow you to leave. You may prove to be a threat, and if so, then you will regretfully be terminated. Rias said harshly, trying to convey the gravity of this situation. Naruto conducted some wind chakra in the blade that was occupying his right hand. Since his head was turned to Rias, he did not see how Kaniko's eyes widened slightly at the feeling of chakra. No one else seemed to notice the chakra. I also cannot allow you to leave because you are linked to me in a sense. Rias started, making Naruto's eyes turn curious. However, it did not interfere with the sharpness his orbs held at the "cannot allow you to leave" statement. I saved you from death by implementing into you some of my magic and heal you by lathering yourself through magic via skin contact. Naruto's eyes widened in understanding, realizing why he had healed from last night. Her claim was plausible, kind of. He didn't know the components of magic or its uses, but he figured it was the same sort of healing as the Kyubis. We devils use something called the chess piece system, where we are able to reincarnate humans into devils. I used every piece I had left on you, only to find that none worked. Rias stated. That is unheard of. Without being able to reincarnate you, I decided to impart into you some of my magic. This was only meant to increase your healing factor, as my magic is rather potent. I did not expect you to make any changes other than that tiny boost of healing speed, but your body adapted at a surprising rate, and was able to make other changes. That is most likely the reason for your display of speed this morning. Rias finished. That must also be the reason for the changes in my chakra amongst other things that Kurama commented on. Naruto thought to himself. He nodded. That would make sense. I guess I am indebted to you. Naruto admitted. That does not give you hold over my life. Just because you saved my life doesn't mean that I trust you completely. He informed her. You may not have any obligation to blindly follow me, but I still can't let you go. She said firmly. This is a huge inconvenience for you, I know. But you could be a threat. Naruto didn't like this. He most likely couldn't defeat these people. He wasn't even sure he could flee without being caught. He would probably stand a chance if he used the Kyubi's chakra, but that would probably end up in the same result as it had last night, only this time Rias would not heal him. He would have had the art of surprise if it wasn't for the fact that everyone was obviously wary of him right now. He had little choice in the matter of going with her. He hoped what he was about to do wasn't a mistake. Alright, I'll go with you. Naruto said with a sigh and slump of the shoulders. He slid the kunai back up his sleeve stealthily. He could not risk them seeing the kunai and deeming him a threat. Rias nodded. She formed a pentagram on the ground that bathed the room with a crimson light. She then stepped over to it, along with her servants. His face set in trepidation as he did so as well. Shortly after stepping onto it there was a flash of red. Naruto looked around to find a huge set of gates with a colossal castle that protruded from over the gates in an intimidating way. Looking up to the top of the castle, he found that the sky above was a deep purple rather than the conventional color of blue. Welcome to the underworld. Naruto stared at the ceiling as he lay on the bed, his arms splayed out to his sides and his legs off the end of the bed, thinking on what had transpired. He was in the underworld right now, threatened into coming here. He was residing in a castle that belonged to the Gremory family. Ria's family. It had been a few hours since he came here, and not a lot had happened honestly. He had met no one in the underworld save for the maids and servants that appeared to be chronically busy. Ria's parents were going to be out for a few days. They had an important thing to go to apparently, not that he really cared for the reason of them not being here. Her brother was also not going to be here for tonight. Tomorrow was when he had to meet the redhead's brother. He was actually kind of nervous. He generally sucked when it came to conversing with nobles. He always gave people derogatory terms, even his superiors. Hell, he called both of the Hokages that he worked under their own nicknames, Old Man, and Granny, respectively. He respected them both greatly, but he just didn't show it through all of the polite etiquette crap. He never believed that one person is better than another just because they were born into rich families, or given opportunities that others are not given. But he definitely did not want to appear too rude. He was living in their home for the time being, they could have just thrown him in a prison or something. Instead he got a very nice room where he could sleep in relative peace. The fact that he was at their mercy didn't help matters either. He didn't want to die before he saw all of his friends again. There were also other things that his mind was strained towards. He had to get training. He had to get his chakra back to the level that it was. There was no other way to get back to the elemental nations. If he wanted to make another dimensional jump, then he had to be able to survive again, and it seemed that in order to do that, he couldn't have the puny reserves, compared to what he had previously, anyway. He didn't understand the mechanics of it, but Kurama did touch on the subject. He would need the Kyuubi's help to gain his reserves, along with finding a way to make a dimensional leap. Naruto wasn't exactly confident about them being able to find a way through Fuinjutsu. The blonde knew a little of the art, having a Fuinjutsu master for a sensei, godfather and all, but that was it. Even the fourth Hokage, who was said to be the greatest master of Fuinjutsu that the world had ever seen, would find a real challenge in transporting through dimensions. So Naruto trying to accomplish the same thing, with accuracy in dimension jumping as well as that, was laughable. The only real way he could think to go back was to get in contact with his sensei, and he didn't know how he would do that. He would confide with the fox, but he could barely talk to the furry bastard. The beast was simply too busy trying to patch up everything that was wrong with Naruto right now. Naruto didn't want to prolong his weakness, so he decided that he should just let Kurama do his thing. Still, that didn't mean that he would stop his training. With the little amount of chakra that he had at the moment, he would have to make the most of chakra control exercises if he didn't want to run out of steam after just a few jutsu. His control hadn't been great throughout his life because his level of chakra had been ridiculous. He could toss around high-level jutsu for a large amount of time, overpowering the enemies he had to face. Now that he didn't have that much chakra, he had to be able to do more jutsu with less chakra. He only knew a few chakra control exercises, but he had the absolute boon on his side. A jutsu that had helped him through thick and thin. Kage Bunshin. Thank God for Kakashi-sensei. Or curse him for showing him one of the most useful things the jutsu could do so late. Being able to make copies that you gain the knowledge of after they disperse was oh so helpful. It really was the ultimate training tool. Now that he had enough chakra to actually create a few, he would use that training method to its full potential. He doubted he could make a huge number, 4 or 5 at the most. After all, it was a very taxing technique chakra-wise, but his chakra was filling up again. Still, he felt so helpless in his situation. Okay, so he wasn't completely useless right now, but he was definitely not where he would like to be. Going against the fallen angel was quite humbling when he didn't have his chakra to lean on. He was just a human with acute reflexes who was adept in hand-to-hand combat. If the fallen angel were just a regular human, then he would have absolutely destroyed her in combat, but she wasn't, and the people outside of this room weren't either. He needed to get his strength back. He was going to. Right now, Naruto was quite limited in what he could do. If he used the fox's chakra, then he would die. and a lot of the jutsu that he knew were very chakra intensive. He had yet to try Sage mode. He wasn't sure that it would be safe with the chakra he had at the moment, and due to the heaviness in the air in Kuo. The city had very little natural chakra that he could call on. The density of the air in the city almost clung to his skin, as if all of the natural energy in the area had been eradicated. The underworld had quite a bit more natural energy that he could feel, which was ironic really. He thought that the underworld was supposed to be devoid of life. He would try to call on his senjutsu energy while he was here, though now was not the time. He had no idea what the Gremory family wanted of him. Rias had said that they were to determine if he was a threat to trans-dimensional security. He did not even know that those words could be used in a sentence. Still, there was likely something else underlying in what they determined to do. He did not want to draw conclusions before meeting with Rias' brother however. Judging by how the beauty and her servants reacted, someone jumping between dimensions was definitely not a daily occurrence. Still, they didn't take him coming here from another plane of existence too far-fetched. Since he had been transported through the human dimension by Rias, they were likely familiar with it, but they seemed to make a big deal out of him coming from a different one. Perhaps it was because they did not know who he was or which dimension that he came from. Although, they might just want to find a way to replicate how he was able to break the laws of physics in his own way. See the benefits to said way, and then kill him when his use had been fulfilled. He sighed. All of this thinking was starting to give him a headache. He would meditate on the situation later. Right now, he just wanted to get some much-needed rest. So, moving up the bed, he rested his head on the pillow and closed his eyes. Falling into a blissful sleep within a minute. He's the what now? Naruto asked, blinking dumbly. He was currently sitting with Rias Gremory and her peerage. They were in the lounge room of the castle that she apparently lived in when she wasn't in the human world. The room consisted of a large chandelier that hung from the ceiling, quite a few comfy, expensive-looking couches and some paintings that looked as if it was painted by one of the great Renaissance artists. Rias and Akeno were both sitting on a leather couch across from the whiskered blonde. Both were drinking their tea with an elegance that merited the name, the two great ladies of Kuo. To Naruto's right sat Yuto. Last was Kaneko, who was sitting at the end of the furniture that both blondes sat on. She was snacking on some chocolate, which for some reason just made her seem more adorable. I said that he is the lord of the underworld. Don't worry, he isn't scary, he is actually kind of an idiot. Rias said, sipping her tea. Naruto blinked again at how she described the top dog of the realm of devils. Okay, so your brother is the leader of the underworld, Lucifer. I am supposed to talk with him and convince him that I'm not a threat to any of the people in this dimension. At her nod he groaned, just my luck. Don't worry, he is very friendly, Rias stated as she covered her mouth to hide her giggle at Naruto's expense. He sent her an annoyed glare at her apparent amusement but she ignored it. Our family is said to be one of the most benevolent in the underworld. He will listen to reason. Just relax, she stated matter-of-factly. Naruto leaned back in his chair and let out a huff. He was meant to meet Rias' brother in a few minutes. He was ready to talk to someone of importance, but not the lord of the freaking underworld. You could have told me this beforehand, I would have actually been able to prepare for a meeting like this. You can't say that I should relax when you want me to talk to Satan himself. Naruto grumbled, crossing his arms. If he pouted he would look like a child not getting what he wanted. Fufu, such a cute kahai we have. Can we keep him bucko? Akeno seemed to want to get in on the conversation. She leered at Naruto while speaking. Naruto was hard-pressed not to get too hormonal about the stunning girl. Maybe we can. If Naruto-kun is found innocent that is, said Rias, looking thoughtful. I'm not some kind of pet that you can decide to keep or not. Naruto ground out, growling slightly. Era, are you sure that you wouldn't want to be my pet Foxy-kun? She breathed. Naruto almost choked on his own breath. This woman was way too seductive. Then he pondered his new nickname. Foxy-kun? Naruto tasted the name. I've never had that nickname before. I'll be your first then, how exciting. She seemed to be a bit too excited at being the first to call him that as she held a hand to her blushing cheek. Naruto decided to try and ignore the girl as best he could. Wouldn't do too well to let his mind wander before meeting the lord of the underworld. He didn't exactly want to get thrown in a pit of lava, boiling for eternity or whatever everyone thought happened in the underworld if you pissed off their leader. The noise of the doors opening brought his attention to the figure that walked into the room. It was a man who was rather tall with shoulder-length, red hair. The color was very, very similar to Ria's locks, the only difference being the slightly darker shade. Two flowing bangs framed his face and ended at his chest. His hair was not the only similarity that Rias-Ahim shared. His eyes were also similar, if a lighter shade of green. In fact, they were bordering on silver because of how light they were. He was wearing a very flashy set of armor, which made him appear much more broad-shouldered and all the more imposing. If the similarities between the man and Rias didn't alert Naruto as to who this was, the way that everyone bowed in respect of the man did. Naruto stood from his spot and turned to fully face the man. The imposing figure stood in front of him and looked him up and down. After his evaluation, the man put on a laid-back smile. "You must be Naruto-kun?" Sirzex asked, though it wasn't really a question. At Naruto's nod he continued, "Rias-tan has told me all about you." The man stated jovially, sounding almost proud of his connection with Rias. Said girl looked rather embarrassed but stayed silent. Naruto didn't know how to respond to that. He settled with not asking why the Crimson Satan called his younger sister that. "It is an honor to meet you, Sirzex-sama," Naruto said with a bow. The red-haired man waved it off. No need to be so formal. Naruto was very thankful for the man's laid-back personality. He really wasn't one for formalities either. "It is very nice to meet someone from an unknown place, though you don't seem all that different from a regular person. You may not know this, but what you have done was thought to be impossible." The man said. "Wait, but you guys are able to travel through dimensions, aren't you?" Naruto asked. "Yes, we are able to. However, there are a few differences that make what you did very significant." The man said. "You see, we are only really able to travel through a small number of dimensions. The underworld, the human realm, and heaven to name a few." Sirzex told Naruto. "There is one place that we can't go to though, and that is the dimensional gap. No being is meant to travel through this place, as nothing but Great Red itself is meant to exist there. The fact that you were able to travel through the dimensional gap without getting ripped to shreds is unsettling, to say the least." The red-haired man stated, looking serious for the first time in their conversation. "What is Great Red?" asked Naruto. He was curious about it, but the question was also meant to grant him time to think about the answers to some of the questions that he expected to hear. Great Red is a being with unimaginable power. He is the most powerful dragon in existence, and resides within the dimensional gap which you passed through to get to the human realm. I want to know how you were able to pass through the dimensional gap without dying." The redhead said. He obviously wanted to get back to the topic of Naruto not dying. He seemed quite adamant about it. Naruto had to think about this. He didn't have a reason to distrust these people. Naruto couldn't detect a single lie coming from the Satan in front of him. Though, he didn't want to tell these people the whole story, which would not only take an absurd amount of time, but was also kind of personal information that Naruto didn't want to just give out to people he had just met. He decided that he would tell them the truth of how he got here and some of where he was from, but wouldn't go into a great deal of description. "Well, I am from a different dimension as you say. I am from a place called the Elemental Nations. I was sent here because I was saving my friends from someone. The only real way to beat the dude was to send him somewhere where he couldn't come back. So I sacrificed myself by holding him down long enough to have my sensei send us both away from our world." Naruto finished, and mentally patted himself on the back for not giving his entire life story away. He knew it would be short-lived though, as he barely told them any information on the ability that was used to send him here or how he survived in the first place. He withheld a sigh at the thought. When he heard sniffling, he turned his head to the source, to find Sirzex actually tearing up slightly at the blonde's story. Such a noble young man. The man wiped away the tears that threatened to spill. Making such a big sacrifice to save your loved ones is just so moving. The man clapped both of his hands on the startled blonde's shoulders. No one so young should have to make that sacrifice. Thank you?" the whiskered teenager said unsurely. The man in front of him was apparently a very emotional person. "That still doesn't answer how you were able to survive the dimensional gap," Rias said to his right. She and her peerage had stayed silent up to that point, most likely due to her brother wanting to be the one to interrogate him. "It also doesn't explain the energy that you released in your fight with Rainier," she said, the silent request to tell her the reasons not needing to be addressed verbally. Naruto did not hold a sigh in this time. Before he could speak however, Sirzex interrupted. Rias-tan, can't you see that Naruto-kun has been through enough already? He shouldn't have to answer questions that will evoke bad memories for him right now. The older man then grabbed Naruto in a bear hug, crushing the poor boy. The red-headed man didn't even notice the blonde's attempts at escape, too busy as he was glaring at his younger sister. Ni-sama, please let Naruto-kun go before you crush him. Rias said, looking worried for the teen. Her request had the desired effect. Sirzex seemed to notice Naruto's struggles and quickly let him go. Naruto gulped the air greedily after being released. That guy had a serious grip. The blonde turned to the man to see him flailing his arms about and sputtering apologies. He then turned back to the beauty, ignoring the man for the moment. Thanks Rias-chan. He panted, his complexion going back to normal. Yeah, well the way I came here was by a technique called Kamui. The ability comes from something called the Sharingan, which is some weird trait that this clan has. The clan is called the Uchiha. The Sharingan is actually an eye ability. Kamui has the ability to send objects or people through dimensions. My sensei had this ability, so I convinced him to send me and the enemy we were facing away, far from the elemental nations. Naruto explained. I have never heard of an eye ability, how does it work? Rias asked, looking extremely intrigued. I don't really know how eye abilities work, they are called dujutsu. Rias looked disappointed that she could not find out the information she wanted. She had always been one for learning all she could about a certain subject. The Sharingan is one of the 3 main dujutsu, said to be the second most powerful of all dujutsu. Naruto finished his explanation. He didn't want to go into all the applications and abilities of the Sharingan, the Byakugan and the Rinnegan, so he held his tongue about them. That still doesn't explain how you were able to travel into the human world. Even if the ability that you speak of is able to transport objects through dimensions, you still had to come through the dimensional gap to get there. There is no way that you were able to come out of the gap unscathed. Rias deduced. Naruto didn't want to inform everyone in the room about his current weakness, i.e. the low chakra reserves, but he probably couldn't get the conversation over with without at least touching on the subject. I didn't come out of it unscathed. When I entered the human world, I was weakened. My current level of ability isn't up to par with what I had before I got here. Naruto informed. What do you mean by level of ability? Kiba asked. I was getting to that. Naruto grumbled, I am not a regular human. Where I come from, it isn't uncommon to exhibit unnatural abilities. Understatement of the year. There were so many ninjas in the elemental nations that it was the majority of the population. At least, it seemed like it. What kind of abilities? Rias asked. Way too many questions, Naruto thought to himself. It seemed that they weren't going to let up on the questioning either. It wouldn't be detrimental if they knew of some of the powers that Naruto possessed, not if they didn't know his abilities specifically anyway. My world is basically a world of ninja. Naruto told everyone in the room. At everyone's deadpan, he decided to continue, I'm one of these ninjas. I'm not that great at the theory stuff, but I'll try to describe some theory to you anyways. The ninjas in my world have control over the elements and some other abilities. We control these powers by converting this stuff called chakra into energy that we can use to control water, fire, earth, wind, or lightning. Or something like that. Naruto finished, scratching his head sheepishly at his poor explanation. Your kind is able to control chakra? Akeno asked. None of the playfulness that was in her tone before was present. The group looked over to Kaneko, who looked slightly wary of Naruto. Naruto noticed her wariness but didn't comment. Yeah, again, not good at the theory stuff. So don't expect a grand explanation about how all that stuff works. Naruto said. He turned to see Sirzex, who was studying him with a critical eye. It was plain to see he was thinking. And the demonic energy? Where did that come from? Naruto almost grimaced at Ria's questions. The blonde didn't know what these people would do with Kurama if they found out about him. The fox was crazy powerful. So they would probably see how they could use him to their advantage. Not exactly everyone in the room specifically, but the general devil population. The Gremory family really did seem as benevolent as Rias said, judging from the 2 that he had met anyway, but he doubted every devil was like that. A portion of my chakra is demonic in nature. It wasn't exactly a lie, his statement did hold some truth in it. The fox's chakra kind of was Naruto's chakra in a way. When I whipped that chakra out, I didn't realize that my body would have such a negative reaction in my weakened state. Hence the reason I collapsed after beating the fallen angel chick. Naruto replied easily. I survived the trip here for a number of reasons, but the main one is my healing factor. The demonic chakra that I have inside my body gives me a huge boost in healing speed. He wouldn't explain all of the reasons. In the words of a wise, lazy genius, it was too troublesome. When Rias opened her mouth, Sirzex put his hand up to silence his sister. She closed her mouth dutifully, seeing the serious look he had on his face. Naruto saw that Sirzex was skeptical about believing Naruto fully. No doubt he noticed the few gaps that Naruto left in his explanation. Sirzex's face then expectantly broke out into a smile. I've got all the information I need for now. Naruto, Sirzex addressed the blonde, I don't think that you are a threat. That is just my belief though. As one of the leaders of the underworld I have to discuss things further with the other Saiyans. For now you will be under the supervision of Rias Tan. The man said enthusiastically, like it was amazing that Naruto was going to be watched constantly. Damn, you serious? Naruto grimaced. He thought he could get off scot-free if he explained the situation to the leader, apparently not. He really should have thought ahead, as if they would just let him go without thinking about the possible uses he could bring. No doubt, in the mind of the higher-ups and leaders he would prove to be useful with the knowledge about another dimension on his mind. At least he wasn't going to be tortured or something for information if he played his cards right. That would be unpleasant to say the least. Totally serious. Isn't that just great? The red-headed man lifted his arms up ecstatically, seemingly not noticing the grimace that Naruto had. Or maybe he's just a huge sadist, Naruto thought. Right now, you are the unofficial member of Rias Peerage. His statement caused Naruto to shudder. Why did he get the feeling that things were going to change from here on out? Naruto sat on the seat at the park he had been transported to. He really liked this place for some strange reason. Maybe it was because this park held such significance. He might be the only one who had traveled through dimensions like this and survived, and this park was where his new life started. It had been a few days since his meeting with Lucifer himself, and again, nothing had really changed. Well, no, a lot had changed actually. His school life was the exact same though. He thought that school would suck a bit more than usual, thinking that he was going to be followed around all day. But really, it was no different. Other than the knowledge that he was now under their scope indefinitely. He had constantly been checking if anyone of Rias Peerage, his peerage, had been following him at any time, but he couldn't detect any of them. He did have very minor sensor capabilities because of his Uzumaki lineage, so he didn't really see any of them getting past his notice. Even if he didn't have crazy good sensor abilities like, say, Karen, he would still be able to sense anyone in a certain range if they didn't hide their chakra signatures. He very much doubted that they were capable of doing that, seeing as they didn't even know that one could have control over the elements with chakra, which was quite basic really, even though he only learnt that when he got back from his training trip. Seriously, couldn't his senseis at least try to teach him? Iruka might have said something about the whole element manipulation in one of his lectures, but those lectures were just so damn boring. It seemed that the peerage had some trust in him, which was okay he guessed. He didn't take to being watched constantly nicely. It was also convenient that he wasn't under constant surveillance. It was that much easier to train. Even though his school life hadn't necessarily had any big changes, outside of school was completely different. He was now treated as a member of Rias Peerage. He didn't see himself as being a servant of Rias, but he didn't complain when she had gotten him to do jobs for her. He was kind of bored outside of school. There was a plethora of things that he could do outside of school, sure, but he liked being useful. The jobs that she got him to do were different from what he was expecting. He didn't think that devils would complete a task for a human who had a desire so that they would sign a contract to the devil that had completed said task. Well, he expected that devils would do something like that, but he thought the devils would double-cross the people that asked for assistance. They didn't though. It was actually rather tame. Like an organization that helps people out. He had gotten a grand total of 2 signed contracts from the 2 he had been assigned to. He shuddered at the second of those requests. Versing a nerd in a video game as a request was one thing, but watching some anime titled, Magical Girl Milky Spiral 7, with a roided up male that dressed like a little girl and said, NYU, in his speech at regular intervals was nightmare fuel. He really hoped that he wouldn't get a request from that individual again for some time. Or ever, if possible. He had done a bit of training in his apartment, surprisingly without blowing the place up, or not so surprisingly, seeing as how it was mostly just chakra control exercises. Along with the fox giving him a few tips for some of the techniques that Naruto was unfamiliar with, he breezed through it. He decided then that he would check something out discreetly. Closing his eyes, he slowed his breathing and stilled, until he was more a statue than man. After some time, his eyes gained a slight orange pigment. He could still go into sage mode in the human world. Though he noticed something was different, he didn't feel as empowered as he usually felt. The feeling of natural chakra was rather dull right now. It took him a few minutes to realize what the problem was. His goddamn chakra. Fukusaku mentioned that only those with extreme chakra levels could utilize the natural energy and invoke senjutsu. Those with smaller reserves couldn't even use a partial amount of its abilities. Naruto was surprised that he could feel anything at all. He just chalked it up to the density of his chakra. Even though he didn't have much of it, his chakra was still much more potent than the regular ninja. He let go of the natural chakra and went back to normal with a frown on his face. Why the hell did nothing go smoothly for him? He guessed that he wouldn't be able to use senjutsu fully until he got his old reserves back. He checked his chakra stores and the frown turned into a small smile. The fox wasn't kidding when he said he would help. At this rate, his chakra would be back to normal very soon. He would still do the chakra control exercises though. When he got back to full reserves, he wanted to be able to concentrate his chakra more. Even if he went back to his old world and there were no adversaries to face, he would become the world's strongest ninja datbayo. Naruto got up and decided to leave for the time being. He would probably have to talk to Rias tomorrow about being the unofficial member of the peerage. Likely, he would have to do something as a member, even if he wasn't in name. If they were forcing him to do something malicious, he would refuse, even if they said they would kill him if he didn't comply. Because he was just that awesome of a person. He nodded to himself. The blonde left the park behind with his hands in his pockets. After only a minute into his walking, he heard a small gasp and turned his head. What he didn't expect to find was white panties with a creamy bottom staring back at him. The owner of the behind seemed to have fallen while she was walking, giving him an unrestricted view of her panties. He quickly turned his head away after realizing that he had been staring for a while. Until he realized that there was a girl that needed Humpy helping. He meant helping. Damn it, Fox. Hey, you okay? Naruto asked, walking over to the girl. The girl seemed to get her wits about her when she heard his voice. Quickly covering up and turning around, she looked at the person the voice belonged to. A quick draft blew the nun hood that she had on her head, allowing Naruto to get a look of her features. The girl was the very definition of the word cute. Her big, bright green eyes held such innocent curiosity that Naruto almost let out a squeal. Another noticeable feature was her blonde hair. It had a shade similar to Naruto's. She had a small bust compared to Rias and Akino's enormous size, but it was definitely not unappealing. They looked rather perky. The whiskered teen banished those thoughts upon noticing her staring at him. Her face took on a deep shade of scarlet when he stared back. Ah, she was shy. So adorable. Hey Anyo, I am a little lost. See, could you help me out? She poked her index fingers together that reminded him of a certain white-eyed brunette. She even had the stutter down. Sure, Naruto responded with a kind smile on his face. He couldn't believe that just seconds ago he was thinking lewd thoughts about this girl. She was so innocent. Thank you, she said with a bright smile, a pink hue slightly lighting up her cheeks. What's your name? Naruto asked, his hands back in his pockets. Asia. Asia Argento. Asia responded. She looked embarrassed for not remembering to give her name to the boy. I'll call you Asia-chan then. Naruto proclaimed, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, just call me Naruto. He pointed to his chest with his thumb, while giving her a wide, toothy smile. She looked up to him and flushed. Naruto-san, she said with a nod. Naruto didn't protest. If she wanted to stick the suffix there, then that was fine by him. So why are you lost? Are you new here? Naruto asked curiously. Yes, this is my first time in Japan, she said with a nod. Where do you want to go? He tilted his head back to look at the sky. The sun had been bothering him quite a bit, and not just because of how bright it was. It was almost like it was weighing him down. Maybe it was becoming part devil, he mused. Ah, the church, she responded shyly. I should have known, your nun outfit looked too cute on you to be a real one though. I thought that it might have been cosplay. He joked. Asia turned her head to the side to hide her beet red face. Thank you, Naruto-san. She stuttered. She probably didn't know what cosplay was, Naruto thought to himself. So cute, he crowed, hugging her while rubbing their cheeks together. This caused the girl's already red face to go into shade of red so bright that he wasn't even sure it was a shade that was known to man. Naruto was a sucker for cute things, he wouldn't deny that. And this girl seemed to have cuteness in spades. Naruto-san, she gasped. Though, she seemed to like the affection that Naruto was giving her, he noticed. She didn't look like she was used to it though. Naruto stopped his affectionate actions when he saw that a boy nearby had fallen over on the sidewalk. The child held up his scraped knee and started crying. Both blondes looked over to him. Naruto let go and started walking over to the boy. Before he could reach the kid, however, Asia ran over to him. She kneeled down to look at the scraped knee and put her hand to it. Don't worry, I'll heal it for you, she said gently. Naruto half expected her to pull out a band-aid or pray for it. The green glowing light that protruded from her hand onto the boy's injury was not what the blonde was expecting. The boy on the ground stopped crying and looked at the injury that had begun healing in awe. As did Naruto, he had seen medical ninjutsu before, but for a regular human to be capable of it was quite something. The injury healed within seconds. Thanks Oni-san, the boy said to her, before running back to his friends that were looking over at him. You know, Naruto began, I don't think it is all that normal to be able to heal injuries like that just by placing your hand over it. He said lightly. He needed to know what that power was. That is a gift that I received from God, she replied with a sad smile. Naruto frowned at the melancholic look that she had on her face. He had to find out about her powers, but seeing her sad affected him more than he liked to admit. So, he would do something uncharacteristic and unbecoming of a ninja of his stature. He would let it slide. He would confront her on it later, but right now he didn't want to bring up sad memories for the girl. It was their first meeting, and she was just too damned kind to be sad. The two continued their walk after his outburst, until Naruto saw the church in the distance. His body froze up when he saw the building. He felt some force almost repel him from the gothic-looking structure. It's over there. He gestured to the building, not letting his inner feelings to be known to the kind girl beside him. Ah, thank you so much Naruto-san, she said happily. She turned to him and gave him an innocent smile. My pleasure Asia-chan, after all, I couldn't just leave my cute little Imouto alone, could I? Naruto said with teasing smile. Imouto? She looked shocked at receiving the title. She then looked unsure, poking her index fingers together and taking quick glances at him before looking away. I'm your Imouto? She asked, almost self-consciously. As if he could say no to that. It would be like killing a puppy. Yeah, of course, he said kindly. His answer was apparently the right one, if the way that she beamed at him was any indication. I'm so lucky I got to meet Naruto-san. You're so kind and gentle, she said with her decidedly innocent smile back in place. If you ever have time you should visit me in the church. Promise me, okay? I will. See you soon. He waved while leaving. Hi, Oni-chan, she said, waving back before she ran in the direction of the church. Naruto turned back to study her fleeting form. He was interested in that power that she had. Sure, he didn't bring it up after the emotions she displayed after using the power, but he had to wonder. Was she just able to use medical chakra? No, he doubted it. Even if medical ninjas usually had less chakra because they needed precise control, they still needed more than she had. He could sense that she was just a regular civilian. Other than that strange power she had, she was completely normal. Perhaps she was some kind of rarity amongst the humans that lived here. Someone who had inherent powers. Damn, he really had been overthinking a lot of things lately. Maybe he should take a page out of Shikamaru's book and laze around a little bit. He shook off the thought. He had to go see Rias and ask her what was up with his reaction at seeing the church. There was no way that he would have such a reaction normally. He walked to where he believed the school was. You are not to see that girl again. Those were the words that Naruto heard after explaining who he had met. His eyes narrowed at the command. The two were in the occult research club room alone. The rest had gone home, leaving Rias and him. And why would that be? He asked the beautiful woman that was looking at him with a serious gaze, and if Naruto was correct, a hint of concern. Anyone who is affiliated with the church is dangerous to us. She is in league of the enemy, and I will not have one of my precious servants talk to someone that will put them in danger. She said. Naruto was actually kind of touched. He wasn't expecting her to be so protective of him. Yeah, he didn't hate her, but he never saw them as being close, considering she's his proverbial jailer. Still, he wasn't going to take no for an answer. Rias, I can't just not talk to her again for your own prejudiced conceptions. Naruto stated. It is not prejudiced, they are a literal threat to us. If they find out that you are a devil, even part devil, then they will kill you on the spot. Rias said. She stood up from her desk and walked over to him. When she reached him, she stroked her fingers lightly on his cheek. Against his will, he leaned into it. The soft digits felt pleasant on his skin. I will not forgive them if they hurt my cute servant, Rias said gently. Naruto let out a slight purr. Then his eyes snapped open. He looked worriedly at Rias, who was trying to hide her giggles. You heard that, didn't you? He asked, even though he knew the answer. Maybe, she said teasingly. She had a glint in her eyes, one that spelled trouble for Naruto in the future. Again, he cursed the fox. He was trying to be domineering in this situation, but here he was, purring at the touch of her hand on his whisker like birthmarks. It seemed that some of the characteristics Naruto gained included his whiskers being sensitive. He sighed. He looked back into her eyes. I will not go back on my promise to talk with her again. But I do realize that the church is dangerous for me right now. I won't visit her, but if I see her in town at all, then I won't snub her. She is my friend, and I can't see her as being a threat to anyone. He smiled. Believe me, I am an excellent judge of character. Maybe he wasn't. He did have a revenge-obsessed emo for a best friend, and he did fully believe that Kabuto was a nice dude at the Chunin exams. Although, he couldn't be faulted for that. After all, that dude was a crazy good actor, plus everyone got fooled by that guy. Even though he was a sick bastard, he was a damn good spy. I can't say that I agree with what you just said, but I know that I won't be able to change your decision, she said depressingly. Then she put on a smile. I guess that's just who you are. Naruto blinked at the almost wistful tone of her voice. Thanks, Naruto responded. Be careful, Naruto, she said. He was about to say something back when a pentagram appeared on the floor. The red light illuminated the room, alerting the two occupants that someone was summoning them. Please do that request. After you are done, come back to the room. I wish to talk to you more, Rias said with her hypnotic voice. Yeah, okay, the blonde shinobi said, shrugging. He walked over to the magical circle and teleported away. Naruto's nostrils were permeated with a familiar smell. Blood. His mind went into full alert. He quickly looked to the floorboards and the wall to find them covered in blood. He followed the trail of blood to the door in front of him was half opened, the only source of light in the room on the other side of the door. He took slow, quiet steps while crouching low on the ground. He peered his head out of the door to find a silver-haired male sitting on one of the couches in the apartment. Naruto could only see his back, but the air of nonchalance was around him. Naruto scanned the area. The blood led to the right side of the room. He looked over to find a corpse of a man that was crucified on the wall. He looked back towards the man who had likely caused this murder. The blonde could kill the man swiftly as he wanted to, but he had to find out what the man wanted and what he gained from killing the man that was now just a gruesome display on the wall. The whiskered ninja walked silently to the guy on the couch, his steps making no sound at all. He flashed out his kunai, while going over to the most likely soon-to-be dead man. Without warning, Naruto put the kunai to his throat. If you do not listen to my demands, then I will slit your throat, Naruto whispered coldly into the now surprised man's ear. The surprise didn't last, however, as a deranged smile threatened to split the man's face. Little devil is making demands, the man said in some twisted amusement. Naruto narrowed his eyes. This guy was obviously not all there. That would make his interrogation that much more difficult. The man also knew that Naruto was a devil. Yes, and little devil doesn't want to have to cut off one of your little fingers, so answer my questions. The first step to interrogation was to be an immovable object. If the individual in questioning tries to taunt you, You throw it back at them while threatening them at the same time. Oh, and he has a brain on him too, that's fucking hilarious. The man exclaimed with a laugh. Okay, so maybe this guy would be a little bit harder to crack than a regular person, probably due to his sanity or lack thereof. Time for some reinforcement. Grabbing the guy's hair, the blonde pulled his head back and so the man could see the icy look of Naruto's eyes. The blonde let out a deep growl, sending killing intent to the man, making him receive the brunt of it due to the close proximity and concentration that Naruto was sending out at him. What is your name? Naruto applied more pressure on the blade so that it was dangerously close to spilling the man's blood. Fried Selzen, nice to meet you, shitty devil. The man introduced himself, letting his tongue flop out of his grinning mouth. Despite the killing intent that Naruto was sending to the man, he seemed totally unaffected. Nice to see you complying. Now, for what purpose did you kill this? His question was cut short by a gasp to his left. He turned his head to find dazzling green eyes staring at him in shock. Naruto-san? Wait, Asia-chan? What are you? Again his sentence was interrupted by the sound of a blade coming out of its sheath. Naruto was just able to jump back from the blade before it impaled his face. He landed next to the wall, next to the dead body that was hanging limply. Naruto looked to Fried and found the deranged smile that had yet to leave his features. His red eyes glowed ominously in the dark room. The white-haired man sported a large black trench coat with golden trimmings over an exorcist uniform. He also had a golden necklace in the shape of a cross. His insane eyes looked over to the blonde girl, then back to Naruto. Then his already large grin widened even more. Oh, so you know this shitty devil Asia-chan? The man said. Fried-san, what is that man doing on the wall? Her eyes were wide and beginning to tear up at the sight of a man killed in such a way. I almost forgot, you're new here aren't you Asia-chan? The man didn't keep his eyes off of Naruto as he pulled out a gun and let his sword drop into a ready stance. Naruto eyed the weapons for a moment. The sword did not look normal. It was glowing brightly, likewise, the gun didn't feel normal either. These were probably the light weapons that Rias mentioned before. Even if the guy in front of him was a regular human he was a threat. Our duty is to kill shitty devils and the shitty followers of those shitty devils. The man lacked a decent vocabulary for cuss words it seemed. Naruto-san. Are you a devil? The girl looked shocked. Partly, yeah. I will explain it to you later, but first I gotta get you away from this guy. His eyes turned to the girl but his attention was mostly on Fried. Wait in the bedroom, I will come get you after I'm done with him. He said with a reassuring smile. Even though his face was turned to Fried, it seemed to quell the girl's fears. She nodded and ran out the door. Naruto focused his eyes back on the crazy man that was in front of him. The smile completely gone, leaving an icy look of disdain. You dragged Asia-chan into this. Naruto hissed. Yeah, the bitch is useful for a couple of things. I haven't pounded that virgin soil yet, but I would have if you had have taken any longer. Fried said with a leer. The exorcist lifted his gun and pointed it at Naruto. Naruto for his part, increased the output of killing intent until even Fried realized that what he said might have been a bit too much. The anger that Naruto was feeling was almost palpable, rolling off his person like waves. His eyes bled into violent red. He abstained from using too much of Kyuubi's chakra, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to not go into a fit of absolute rage. His fangs elongated to the point where they were poking out from his lips, resting on the bottom lip. His eyes also darkened as he felt what little of his self-control that he had left rapidly diminish as he looked at the grin that hadn't left the bastard's face. Fried let out a maniacal laugh as he pulled the trigger of the gun that was aimed at Naruto. Before the bullet left the barrel, Naruto threw the kunai at an inhuman speed. The blade hit the hand that held the gun, blood flying from the gash. Not expecting the pain to erupt from his hand, Fried dropped the gun and yelped. The time was all that Naruto needed. Naruto's form blurred as he ran at Fried, closing the distance between them in less than a second. Naruto grabbed the blade's hilt. He kicked Fried in the stomach while pulling on the hilt from Fried's hand, sending him to the other side of the room. The deranged priest hit the wall, almost breaking through the side. Naruto took a moment to eye the weapon in his hand. The light of the sword was burning his skin slightly due to the close proximity. He paid it no mind though, he could deal with the pain. Naruto looked back at the silver-haired man and was surprised to see that the man was running back towards the blonde. Naruto couldn't just kill the man, even if the guy was a total psycho. He still needed info from the guy, which was the reason Naruto didn't end his life with the kunai seconds prior. He would maim the opponent if need be, but he wouldn't murder the man, yet. Naruto horizontally swung the light sword, aiming for the man's chest. The exorcist surprised him yet again. For a human, Freed was very fast. The man rolled under the swing and appeared behind Naruto still crouching. Naruto turned his body towards him, set on delivering another slice, until he saw the barrel of a gun that was aimed at his face. Reacting on instinct, Naruto leaned his head back. A flash of light skimmed past Naruto's face, grazing a few of the hairs on his head, accompanied by a large bang milliseconds later. Naruto jumped while leaning his body back. He flipped over the coffee table and couch, landing on the other side of the furniture. He quickly ducked his head, avoiding another shot from the large pistol. He crouched behind the chair. Shit, now he had a maniac on the other side of the room who was aiming at Naruto with a freaking gun. Naruto had not had an encounter with a weapon like this before. He had heard about guns in this world, but he had never had to fight someone who wielded one. Back in his home world, they stuck to good old-fashioned blades and explosive tags. This weapon that he was now facing was much more dangerous than a simple shuriken. One shot of the gun could cripple him indefinitely or kill him in a shot if aimed at the right spot, which wasn't what made it especially hard to deal with, oh no. It was the speed. The bullets also went faster than even Naruto's own enhanced vision could see. He needed to come up with a strategy. Several close shots later, he figured out what he could do. Naruto put his hands into a familiar, cross-shaped sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He whispered. A clone popped into existence next to the original. The clone gave a silent nod and jumped over the couch, running at the mad exorcist that was literally gunning for him. The original Naruto put his eye to one of the bullet holes in the couch. He watched as his clone was predictably shot, and it popped into a cloud of smoke. Naruto ignored the phantom pain that he felt from gaining the clone's memories. He launched himself to Freed's position. Freed's eyes widened in surprise. He looked at the cloud of smoke with disbelief. That was when Naruto shot through the smoke. Freed, in his surprise, couldn't react in time for the punch that was sent to his face. Naruto heard a satisfying crunch upon contact. The sound was probably the broken nose that Freed now sported. The exorcist was sent rocketing through the room, hitting almost all of the furniture. His body came to a stop after sliding on the hardwood floor for a couple of seconds. This time, Naruto did not wait to see if he would get back up. Sprinting towards the body on the ground, he stabbed Freed in the arm that held the gun. The priest proved that his pain tolerance was insane for just a regular person by not showing his pain except the grinding of his teeth and the pronounced wince. He did hear that only special individuals could use light swords to their full potential. Though, Naruto couldn't see this guy as being special in any way other than his sick, twisted mindset. I will fucking kill you. You piece of shit devil. Again with the shitty devil thing, Naruto thought. He set his eyes on the enraged look Freed was giving him. The look was kind of justified really. People didn't take to getting stabbed in the arm lightly. Especially if you broke their nose not a minute before. Not that Naruto cared. If you value your tongue then I suggest you shut up. You will only speak when I ask you questions. Naruto twisted the blade to pronounce the threat. Instead of listening though, Freed just spat in his face. Then Naruto screamed. He clutched his face with his free hand to try and soothe the pain. The spit felt like acid that was burning into his face. While Naruto writhed in pain, Freed sweep kicked Naruto to the floor. The blonde regained his bearings within a second. Naruto tried to ignore the pain as best he could as he attempted to grab the sword that was still impaled in Freed's arm. Before he could get it, the man grabbed it by the blade, and pulled it out himself. The priest swung the sword at Naruto's outstretched hand, cutting into the flesh deeply. Naruto hissed and pulled his hand back. He himself had a very high pain tolerance, but this pain was something else. How did you like that holy water you fuck? Freed yelled, laughing despite his obvious pain. The man got to his feet and looked back at Naruto with a vicious smirk. Naruto's red eyes met with Freed's own red orbs. One pair held only insanity and bloodlust, while the other held a righteous rage. Before either could move, however, a magic circle flashed into existence on the ground. Kiba appeared from the circle. It all happened so quickly. Kiba sliced Fried's chest, leaving a long, narrow gash, and kicked the new cut that formed. This time, Fried did scream, as he fell back. Naruto would have winced in sympathy if he wasn't starting to seriously hate this man. "Sorry to interrupt," Kiba said with his patented Bishonen smile, "but he is one of us." Next to come was Akano, who materialized out of the pentagram. Era, there seems to be a problem here. Exorcist. This was said by Kaneko, who also came out of the glowing red magic circle. It was the first time that Naruto had actually heard her talk. He was surprised by the monotone tone of her voice, but it had its own charm to it. Last to appear was Rias, who made the most grandiose arrival out of the four. Dark red and black energy shot from where she stood, leaving Fried, who had only just gotten back up, with only a second to jump out of the way to avoid the dark-looking energy. Naruto looked at the peerage, then back to Fried. Fried looked at the new arrivals in annoyance. More shitty devils that came to interrupt his fun. "Leave. This guy is dangerous, he has a light sword and gun. I don't know if he has any more holy water on him, but if he does it hurts, a lot." Naruto informed them quickly. It really did. His face was having a difficult time healing. He would feel the boiling flesh. It probably didn't look too appealing. He could feel that it was starting to heal a bit faster though. He didn't want to put anyone in danger, and this guy proved to be quite a threat. Even though the exorcist must have been near his limit, the crazed man probably had a couple more tricks up his sleeve. Granted, Naruto was able to beat him swiftly. The only reason the blonde ninja was in such a state was because he didn't expect the guy to spit something that burned through his skin like that. "Naruto, what are you saying? You aren't in any state to fight him." Rias told him. Her form was slowly being clouded by a crimson aura. She looked extremely intimidating. The red-haired devil was giving Fried a death glare. "I can beat this guy fine. Don't try to fight him. Go protect Asia," he said dismissively. Before the redhead could respond, Akano butted in. "Bucko, there will be reinforcements coming," she said. Her eyes darkened gravely. "Shit, we have to finish this quickly." Yuto cursed. Kaneko just nodded while putting on her gloves. They all got into fighting stances. Akano had lightning that was zapping and crackling in her right hand. Rias summoned more of her dark aura. Yuto pulled his sword out and put his right foot forward, bending it, so if he had to spring forward quickly he could more easily. Kaneko picked up a large table over her head with little effort, after putting on both of her fingerless gloves. Fried finally looked wary of the devils that had appeared. He realized that the two chicks with big tits knew how to focus their powers a lot more effectively than the blonde kid could. Plus, with this many devils to face, it was suicidal. Especially considering the injuries that he had gained through the fight. Luckily for him, a portal appeared above his head just in time to make the peerage to stop in their tracks. "Ha ha ha, looks like I got back up. Time for us to kill you worms tilde." Fried yelled the last part sweetly, as if he was talking about an adorable kitten. "Bucko, our top priority is to help Naruto-kun." Akano didn't say the nickname she made up for him in this dire situation. Before any of the peerage members could react, Naruto sprung into the room that Asia had ran into. The blonde kicked open the door. The first thing that came into view was the large portal that was similar to the one that had formed in the living room. It was pretty hard to miss it. When he looked what was inside it, his heart froze. Standing inside the portal was a large man. His attire consisted of a pale violet trench coat over a white dress shirt with a matching ascot, black pants and shoes, and a black fedora. He looked to be a middle-aged man, with black hair and dark blue eyes. His face held a haughty smirk. The man wasn't what caused his heart to freeze, however. What he was holding was. In his arms was an unconscious Asia. He was holding her limp form in a bridal carry. Naruto moved to jump at the man, but it was too late. The man disappeared along with Asia, smirk still in place. Naruto cursed every deity he could think of. He was too late. She was captured and it was his fault. Naruto sprinted back to the living room, focused on interrogating that bastard and all of his reinforcements. He went into the room to see it was empty, all except for his peerage that were looking to where the portal had been. "Where the hell are they?" Naruto demanded, causing the occupants to look at him in surprise. He had never raised his voice to them in the time that they had known him. Akano was the first to recover. They said that they got what they wanted, and then they just left. She seemed confused at the fallen angel's quick departure. Shit, Naruto cursed under his breath. He should have kept Asia in his sights. We have to save her, he said, but then fell to his knees hissing in pain. Naruto, Rias exclaimed. She kneeled to his position and cupped his chin. Naruto meanwhile, was wondering what the hell was up with his body. Did the light of the sword have such a large effect on him? No, that couldn't be it. The cut did take a while longer than he was expecting it to heal up, but that was to be expected. The light did slow down the healing processes of a devil after all. Even with Kyuubi it would take a little while longer. Was it the holy water? Possibly. The holy water was also in his mouth, so it could have made its way into his insides and affected him. Then he realized. Kyuubi. He groaned. He didn't even try to use the chakra. There was only that little bit that he unconsciously used because of his anger towards Freed. Though, he did notice that the strain from using it was significantly less than what it was when he fought against Rainier. Akano, make a teleporting circle now, Rias said to her queen. Hi, bucko. The raven-haired woman nodded dutifully. He stretched her hands forward and began constructing a magical circle. Naruto looked over to where he had last seen Freed. Screw the information. Naruto was going to kill him.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.